Welcome to Video Game Culture and Theory for J-Term 2014-15. I'm Dennis Jers. I'm very happy to be able to teach this class. Nice to meet you virtually. About 8 years ago, Dean Gawalik called me up on the phone and said, "Hey, why don't you offer an online course in video game studies?" And I kind of pinched myself to make sure that I was awake, and I said, "Well, let me think about it," and hung up the phone and danced around the office because I was really happy. And later I told her, "Okay, I considered it, and I think I can go ahead and teach that class." So anyway, um, I'm very happy to be able to do this. I teach in the New Media Journalism major in the English program, and English departments have in the past decades been very progressive about studying things like movies and graphic novels and weblogs and other, really anything that has to do with language and storytelling and representations of the human experience. So I'm very happy to be able to teach this class at Seton Hill. I've taught it a couple times, most recently in January 2012, and I always look forward to it when it comes around in the schedule. Now, as you probably know, final grades for fall 2014 were just due Tuesday, yesterday, and the day before this class starts. So my head is kind of whirling around a little bit. The dust has barely settled on the past semester for me, and already I'm starting the next class. I realize that a J-term class has a funny name if it's starting in December, but uh, as you can see from the material that I've already published in Canvas, coming up we've got some orientation activities, including some more video lectures like this one, some reading as well, and before the break I'm going to be asking you to write a personal essay about your gamer experience and a review of a recent game. All these things are visible right here in Canvas. I'll After the break, we'll move on to some more in-depth study. And all these assignments up to the break are laid out in quite a lot of detail. And as we move ahead a little bit, these other units are not fleshed out quite as much, but I'll get them fleshed out certainly before the break, so you'll be able to work ahead over the break if you so desire. Now, the course does not require you to be sitting at your computer at any particular time during the day. However, the course also is not one of those classes where you can do independent modules at your own pace whenever you want. Um, there's a lot of discussion in this class because in any humanities class, I believe that you'll learn quite a lot from discussing these texts and issues with your peers. So, demonstrating your willingness to engage with your peers in an online discussion is a big part of the learning process. So to be having meaningful conversations online, we have to be going through the course at the same pace. So there are regular deadlines that ask you to share your ideas about assigned texts and assigned games and other activities. With the days that we have in December, we have about 19 work days, if I'm correct, to accomplish the work that we would, in a traditional term course, stretch out over about 16 weeks. So that means that each work day that the class is in session, we have to accomplish about a week's worth of work. That is the work that we would ordinarily cover in a week of classes. My full-time job during the time that this class is in session, I'm making my full-time job at teaching this class. I'm expecting, while this class is in session, to be working for you just as hard as I would work during the regular semester. So please keep that in mind as the very short course progresses. The intensity of a class like this can be a challenge. Also, I think worth noting is the online format of this class. Now, I really like teaching an online class, particularly during J-term. If the weather is bad, I won't have to drive out, and as long as I have a good internet connection, as long as my technology is working okay for me, it's nice to think that I don't have to worry about that commute and parking and so forth. However, there are challenges that I face that come from working at home. I've got family in the house, and at any minute, my wife might come in and say there's a bug that needs to be squished, or a kid says, my daughter says, pick this thing up off a high shelf. So teaching a class from home is a convenience, but there are also distractions that come with that environment. Now, I personally am going to try to manage those distractions by setting a schedule for myself. My goal is to, be at my computer every morning around 9, and I'll be responding to the email that came in overnight. Most of the assignments that you'll submit, not all, but most will be due at 10 in the morning. So I'll spend my mornings marking those assignments. And then after lunch, I'll prep the assignments that will be coming due over the next couple days, and I'll answer student inquiry and um, participate in the online discussions and just kind of keep the class going that way. And I'll aim to finish my workday in time for dinner. I might continue to mark papers and play the games that I've assigned for you. I might do that in the evening, or I might spend my evenings relaxing with my family. Now, I'll probably check my email, or I will certainly check my email during the day, and around 11 o'clock I'll pop in and see how the class is going. That'll be my general pattern. Some days, though, I'll have a doctor's appointment, or I'll have to drive my daughter to an audition, or take my son to a chess tournament, or something like that. So, to make room for those personal activities, I'll have to plan ahead, and that's a time management strategy that I encourage you to employ as well. So, in a regular week of classes during the regular semester, you'd have about 2.5 hours of classroom instruction. And as you know, successful students aim to put in a minimum of 2 hours outside of class for every hour they spend inside of class. Do the math, and you can estimate how much time it might take you each day to do about a week's worth of learning during J-term. Keep in mind also that if you happen to be a faster reader than average, it might not take you that much time. If you're a slower reader, or if you're a more careful writer, or if you have any problems with your technology, college is not about punching a clock and putting in time. The good students will put in as much time as it requires to get the grade that they want from this class. So you'll get regular feedback, so you'll know whether you're pacing yourself and whether you're keeping pace with the amount of work that you'll need in order to get the grade that you would like in this class. So, time management, incredibly important. Start on your assignments as soon as you see them, rather than the day before they're due, or the night before they're due, or the hour before they're due, which can happen in an intense class like this. The course website, this Canvas website at shuinstructure.com, that is your best friend. This is your go-to site to find out what all the assignments are. There's also a course discussion blog, and you'll have your own blog as well. And there'll be details about this in an upcoming assignment. Here we have created a post to your Seton Hill weblog. So that's something that just follow through these assignments. I don't think you'll have a whole lot of trouble there. But if you do have any problems, you can always email me, and I'll do what I can to help you out. Coming up are some more lectures like this one, some more video lectures. So some of the instruction is passive, where you just kind of listen to a lecture and later on apply what you've learned. But that's really only a small part of the instruction. You'll learn much more by interacting with your peers, and the course is set up to encourage that, and there'll be more about that as the next couple orientation activities progress. So this is all not easy to do in an online class if you don't know your peers. So if your peers are just names on a list, it's hard to feel some kind of connection. So we'll start off with an early assignment that introduces you're going to introduce yourself to the class and talk a little bit about your gaming preferences. We'll say hello to each other, and I hope we'll feel a little bit less anonymous and a little bit more connected. Well, let me start, I guess, by breaking the ice a bit by telling you a little bit about myself. I've been at Seton Hill since 2003. I came here to start teaching in the New Media Journalism program. My background is in American literature. I specialized in drama from 1920 to 1950 in America, and I teach courses ranging from news writing and new media projects to Shakespeare and freshman writing. I do some web design, and I do a little programming on the side. My wife sometimes teaches part-time at Seton Hill. She's not for the last couple of years, but she's done it in the past, taught literature classes. And we homeschool a 16-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. So that's a little bit about me. When I was about 12, around 1980, my parents bought us a home computer. And it was pretty cutting edge at that time for 1980. Now, the games that I played with my brother and sister, let me just show you one of the games. This was one of my favorite games that I played as a kid. This is just a YouTube capture of it. It's called Star Raiders. Here we are going into hyperspace. And, oh, I tell you, the sound effects, they are blotchy, the graphics are blocky. But this really brings me back. I am so happy hearing these sounds and thinking of the good times I had with my siblings. I can see, however, it's an incredibly simple game, and I probably would not be all that interested in playing it now. Nevertheless, these were the games that we had in that time. And by the way, this was a game with graphics. Another game that I played back in the day was a pure text game. This is called Zork. There were no graphics. It was all text, no sounds. You would read a story and type commands. Here, there's a small mailbox here. Open mailbox. Opening the mailbox reveals a leaflet. Take leaflet. Taken. Read leaflet. And that's how the game starts. And this was an incredibly immersive experience to use your own imagination and figure out what this house looked like and what the open field west of the White House looked like. My imagination told me a better story than the kind of graphics that were available at the time. And again, this game was a lot of fun, but it was not terribly immersive in terms of storytelling. There was no plot. This was just battle sequence after battle sequence, whereas Zork was puzzles and interesting environments to explore and cool stuff to do in a very interesting storytelling kind of way. Now, at the same time, I also enjoyed, here's a classic game, Asteroids, with vector graphics. Instead of splotchy graphics, you can see these are sort of straight, smooth lines. It's a different technology that showed a different way of creating graphics. Also, a series of games that I enjoyed playing was 2D point-and-click adventure games.
Can I help you in any way?
The version that I played in the late 80s did not have the voiceover actors. This was like a special edition that came out on a CD-ROM a couple years later. We just read text box that popped up. But solving problems, and here's an NPC with a broken cart, and I think later on you're supposed to find a tool of some sort and help him out, and it was a interesting plot and character development, puzzle solving, inventory management, and sometimes timed puzzles. Okay, so those were 2D adventure games. This was Myst. This was an incredibly popular game from the early 90s. It spawned a whole series of games. And the individual graphics were very nicely rendered, but computer technology at the time was such that animating full-screen graphics was just too difficult. And so you see slides. It's not a smooth 3D progression. However, at the time in the early 90s, most of us had never seen graphics this good. And even though you have to sort of deal with the fact that it's jumping from slide to slide, still with the sound and the immersive environment, these graphics really captured people's imaginations and attentions. And this game had a lot of crossover appeal for people who weren't normally computer game players. People who liked stories and adventure movies and fantasies and so forth got into this sort of thing. Another game that I liked playing, this was something, we're getting into the early 2000s now. This was Deus Ex. This is much more.
Your brother Paul is on his way to meet
you. If you play first-person shooters, This game
And
is
the census
very
rating
familiar
document
to the
shows
kind
that
of
the
environment
farm
that you're probably used to. It's, you know,
situation
tools
for
and
HQ.
combat and strategy and some puzzle solving, but a lot of action. I'll tell you a story about playing that particular game. Uh, I installed it for the first time late one night in 2002. My wife was at that time very pregnant with our second child, my daughter. I got through the first level and I was just starting the next level, and I heard the voice from the next room. My wife said, "It's time." In the middle of the night, I took her to the hospital. Um, I did not get back to playing that game for weeks, but it had a great impact on me. It was a first person shooter with a powerful story and some role playing components based on whether you uh, picked certain augmentations to your virtual body. You could solve certain puzzles by stealth or by combat or by a role playing component where you would, have dialogue trees and ask NPCs for questions that would give you passwords and so forth. So there are usually multiple ways to solve puzzles. Or to end levels, sometimes through combat, sometimes through puzzle solving, sometimes through stealth. And uh, that meant that the games had a lot of replay value. That's Deus Ex. Now, around 2003 2004, I started making my own levels in Deus Ex using that particular game engine. That was kind of fun. Moving on from there, uh, I also got into playing Half-Life 2 and Portal and some of those other games like that. Those are first-person games that are not just shooters, but also have a lot of puzzle-solving components and a good story and good voice acting and a good world to explore. So those are the kind of games that I like. There's also another side to me that likes playing God games. This is when my son was about 11.
Trial by error. It's something that very young people really enjoy. In Civilization 3, you are commanding this Empire wannabe civilization, and there's this incredibly delicate balance that you have to control between income and advancing. If you put too much.
Okay, my son goes on and talks about that quite a bit, but that is a strategy resource management game from an overhead perspective, God game. Um, that's another kind of game that I enjoy. I also like fantasy role playing games. When my daughter was 8 and my son about 12, the three of us used to play. We'd spend our Friday nights and so forth playing Dungeons and Dragons online. I thought that was great fun. In recent years, my son said he thinks DDO is a little bit boring. He'd prefer to play different games with more combat. And my daughter's gotten very active in local theater, and so she's usually at a rehearsal or in a performance or something like that. So we no longer have these big stretches of time for family gaming nights. And that's a situation where the my family situation has changed. The kids are doing more activities on their own, and that affects the kind of gameplay that we do. So that's an interesting family dynamic. That if you're studying video games exist in a culture, in an environment, and my family environment is one of those environments in which one might be able to study games. The environment in which you play games might be more your friends, or might be more a different group. Than the sort of nuclear family unit. I think nuclear family. My wife has no interest in video games, but anyway. Also on my own over the years, I've played the Elder Scrolls role-playing games, fantasy games. I played the versions 2, 3, and 4. 4 was Oblivion. I still play that every so often. I never got around to buying the most recent Elder Scrolls game, Skyrim, even though I read great reviews about it. I haven't exhausted Oblivion yet, and so I'm going to save Skyrim for someday when I'm bored with Oblivion. Lately, though, now, I've found in my spare time, I've chosen to spend what spare time I have. I'm actually more interested in lately in creating games. This is the free 3D graphics environment called Blender 3D that has a game engine. And here's a griffin doing a little walk cycle animation. And let me just play this game for you. here's a test of the game engine, and let's let our Griffin walk around a little bit. There we go. Okay, so um, these are some of my preferences. I just showed you some games that I choose to play for fun, and as a new media instructor, new media scholar, I'm extremely interested in media that are not only things that people consume, but I'm interested in media that people can use on their own to create things. So for me, I don't feel like I understand a computer game unless I've tried to build a computer game like the thing that I'm interested in. And that helps me sort of look under the hood and really appreciate the accomplishments when I encounter a really good game in the outside world. Now, for the purposes of a college course, learning about the general subject of games does require us to stretch our experience, to focus on games that are good subjects of study because they illustrate a trend or a new development, or because the developer is using the medium of the game in a surprising or a shocking way. Or maybe because the game was really bad and we want to learn how and why such a game ever got made and why a response to it is so negative. The Introduction to Game Studies video that I'm assigning for you soon will go into that kind of thing in a little bit more detail. But my immediate point right here and now is to confess that there are plenty of games that I don't particularly enjoy, that I would never pick up on my own for fun, but that I recognize are worthy subjects of study. So, for example, I really have no particular interest in martial arts combat games, or really any games related to sports. They're just not my thing, even though I recognize these are a huge part of the games industry and they're worth exploring and studying. I'm not personally a huge fan of games like Grand Theft Auto. I am, however, interested in emergent gameplay, that is, a really wide open playing field where you can set your own goals and you can sort of live in an environment rather than sort of playing a game on rails. That's an interesting experience for me. So even though I'm not really interested in driving games, I did pick up a copy of Grand Theft Auto, an old version from a bargain bin, and I played it for a while, really just to see what the experience was like. And I had fun smashing cars and, driving cars off ramps and stuff like that. I can see the appreciation. I can appreciate the interest that people have in it. But the violence embedded in the game structure was just not my thing. I wanted to see what the fuss was about, and I liked it. Another area of games I don't really play at all is the casual games on Facebook. I can't stand them. I hate it when people on Facebook ask me for extra lives or invite me to play games on Facebook. Please never invite me to play a game on Facebook. But one summer I got kind of obsessed with Candy Crush on my iPod Touch, and I've been past level 100 in Candy Crush, and I moved on to something else. But I just want to say that casual games are a very important part of the video game studies landscape. And many people who play casual games on Facebook or on their handheld devices would not consider themselves a gamer, just as the hardcore gamers who play Call of Duty and things like that would not consider somebody who plays Farmville or Animal Jam or something like that a gamer. But those casual games, those lighter games, those different kind of games are part of the gaming culture, and often older players and women play a lot of those casual games. And if we're going to study games, we need to include a wide range of games, not just a narrow subset of games. All right. I like stories in games. I like games that have a strong story. I really enjoyed the story of Half-Life 2. It made I don't know, maybe too much. Half-Life 2. It's an old game now. In 2006, I was playing Half-Life 2. I got stuck in an aqueduct level, and I've still never finished it. But I got interested in modding my own Half-Life 2 levels, and I watched my kids finish Half-Life 2, and Portal is another game that they liked. when my son was about 13, the protagonist in Half-Life 2, Gordon Freeman, was his hero, and both kids liked Portal, and my daughter was about 9. She would talk like GLaDOS all the time, and if you're a fan of Portal, you know what I'm doing. I personally haven't finished either of those games, but they were a big part of my kids' childhood. And I was there when my kids finished those games because they saved the final combat for when Daddy could watch them, and it was a great experience that we had together. They will have memories of finishing Half-Life 2 and finishing GLaDOS the way I had a memory of my parents taking me to see the original Star Wars movie in 1977 in the theater. So I'm as interested in how video games play a role in my kids' life as I am in how they play a role in my own life. Certainly my kids play games more than I do at this point, but so there you go. I just shared with you some details from my own personal experiences with computer games. No two of us in the class are likely to have exactly the same gaming experiences, so we each have a lot of knowledge that the others lack. Now, my goal for the first week of this class, the first week or so, is to set up a framework where I can teach you what it means to study computer games, video games, and any game, and learn from each other as we study games. That's what I want us to do. So we'll explore some classic games that have been around for a long time, long enough for us to see the impact these games have had in the years and even in some cases decades afterwards. As computing power has increased and gaming demographics have changed, we'll look at some of these older games for the same reason that today's military generals will study the wars fought by ancient Romans, or why today's artists will study classic painters and sculptors. Games are still games, just as war is still war and art is still art, even though the advances in technology mean the tools that we use in order to, game or war or make art have changed drastically. The fundamentals behind those are still the same, and in order to understand what the state of games is today, we have to study the past. Okay, so if you have not already done so, take a look at the syllabus and go ahead and dive into those orientation activities. I'm looking forward to hearing from each of you as we start our journey on video game culture and theory at Seton Hill University 2014 to 15.